I've just been speaking with Deborah, the site manager, and I'm now with Amy Macken, who is a paleoecologist who's been studying at the site for many years now, doing your PhD, and now you hold a further position at the caves as well, don't you?
That's right.
Yeah, and so we've been working together for a while now. I could say, it's been a little bit different. You've been more to me in the work that I've created as just a scientific consultant. You've almost been a creative consultant as well in the way that the work has developed, and that's been an interesting aspect of what we've done. And when people see the work, they'll look on the right hand side and see the column there, and that element, as well as some other elements, was really something that I was engaging with you in totally as a collaboration. So, I could talk about it, but I think that, if you could tell me a bit more about, what that was about and how we were working there.
Sure. So the column actually represents a section from one of the fossil deposits here. It's an excavation made in Blanche Cave, and the section covers the top metre of that profile. The time span for that is from about 14,000 years in the past to about 50,000 years. And what we've actually been able to represent in that column is vegetation record that's been derived from there. And that work actually is from a paleontologist on the site, Dr. Liz Reed, who's been really looking deep into the different types of fossil materials that are in the caves. So Blanche Cave is a small mammal and a small vertebrate fossil site, but her work's uncovering a whole range of other fossils, including pollen. And so what we've been able to actually represent in that column is the way in which the pollen shows vegetation changing over that time period down here at the caves.
Mm. And also what that we went on a number of walks as well, and it was inspiring when I learnt about the dunes and the different swampy type areas as well with the megafauna, and starting to imagine, because this is a very important part of, say, my work, although it's not necessarily evident, is imagining these types of paleo environments. And that was another one of the things that you really gave me an access point into. So I started to imagine, I remember we talked about it, say, Zygomaturus, which was a hippo-like type animal living in these swampy types of estuaries and things like that. So I found that was something that working with you really enriched, what I was doing as well. And seeing you talk about it to students and seeing like the enthusiasm. I think also that came out to a degree in the work, because the more we talked about it, the more excited I got about it. And but it was also challenging because the science was very complicated. Did you feel that in terms of how do we, because you came back to me a number of times when I was asking difficult questions because I didn't know the questions to ask really, and you were able to interpret that. So it's probably the main part of the work where there really is scientific interpretation. In my artwork, it's probably the main section.
Well, that's really lovely to hear. I'm really pleased that I've been able to be involved in the process, and it's been nice for me to explore being able to graphically represent some of the science and to do that in a creative way. And one of the things I remember we talked about was that the vegetation changes that are evident in the pollen record, they're not necessarily really dramatic. What they are is subtle, and it's in the subtlety and that detail that I think the real lessons we can learn are. And that relates back then to the local geology and talking about the dune systems here in the interdunal areas, and that really when we think about a complex landscape like that even with a background of climate change, having all these microhabitats means that potentially vegetation communities and then faunas can persist in small pockets, and that's certainly what the fossil record is showing us. So then the real challenging and interesting questions that emerge are, well, if the changes are subtle, are they always subtle, and are there any points in time where we might see some changes that are outside of this sort of baseline?